Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
And now it's time to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Mary Ann.
Hi, my name is Mary Ann, and I am an alcoholic. And I bet you're all hoping I don't talk like I walk. I'm going to have to stop using that, but it always has, because I'm so, I used to be moved so fast and talk so fast. And when I was about 50, my legs started committing suicide, and I've had to slow down. So as the curtain goes down on my life, anyway, I'm glad to be here tonight. This is a nice group, and it's a pleasure to be here and celebrate Friday night with you. And I want to thank Jerry for asking me, and thank Wayne for leading the meeting and for giving a good talk. And getting hit by a bus isn't the answer. I was walking. I used to work at up in Beverly Hills in a delicatessen. And I was walking to work one day, and the next thing I knew, I said, "What happened?" And I was on a gurney, and the guy said, "You've been hit by a bus." And and that wasn't the answer either. It didn't kill me, but it really doesn't alter things for the better. So if you can find a different way to do things, choose something besides getting hit by a bus. So anyway, I was born and brought up in the Middle West. I'm from Northeast Iowa, and that's where I learned about life, and it wasn't all that bad. But I was kind of a different, kind of odd little person, and I kind of very early on got the idea, one of many ideas, but a paramount idea in my life was that although this wasn't the wrong place for me to be, it was not where I was going to flower. Somewhere out there, I was going to flower. And I'm going to tell you something that is absolutely the truth. And I've known it I've known that this situation happened all my life, but I didn't really connect. When I was a little girl growing up in Old Wine, Iowa, there was a store called the Children's Store, which, strangely enough, was devoted to clothing for children. And my mother and I were in there one day, and I was about maybe somewhere between 5 and 7. And I had pigtails, and I did wear glasses, but I had that sort of little Irish face. And there was a little movie actress at that time named Margaret O'Brien. And one of the sales ladies said to my mother about me, "She looks like Margaret O'Brien, doesn't she?" And I spent the next, I hate to admit it, but probably about 40 years chasing after the idea that when I was a movie star, everything would be okay. And that was one small comment from somebody, and it really did kind of color my life. I always thought something out there was going to do it for me. And it was the 40s and 50s, and women, there were women in politics. I think the name Claire Booth Luce comes to mind. But, most women that had power, I think, I thought were like starlets and movie stars or entertainers of some kind. And I think that I probably have always felt rather powerless. And I think that probably what I wanted more than to share my gift with the world was to get a little power. And I thought that I'd have it that way. And of course it didn't happen, because I'm not very ambitious. I want this to be like leadership, I want it thrust upon me. And so I graduated from high school and didn't have anything to do, so I went to hairdressing school. And I look at this, I'm usually how interested. One of the reasons my hair is gray is because I can't afford to go and have it colored every 3 months, and I'm not going to do it myself. So I decided very early on that gray gray was going to have to be okay. But I graduated. But the significance of that hairdressing academy experience is that that's where I started drinking. I was invited out one night by some people who were a little bit older than I was. Drinking was a part of the evening, and I went from somebody out for the evening to somebody the book describes an alcoholic to be, and that is the alcoholic is very rarely mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. And from that day until the day I stopped drinking, August 4th, 1969, I was, for the most part, when drinking, I was more or less insanely drunk. And quite frankly, even on the days and nights when maybe I was able to drink and not have anything go wrong, it was still a form of insanity because I could, from the beginning, not predict or control my behavior once I started to drink. That first night, I knew that I was behaving foolishly and I couldn't stop. And so from the very beginning, I was powerless. And I will also say that the next day, when I came to sicker than I'd ever been in my life, and somehow or another got dressed and went off to that hairdressing academy, and somebody came up to me and said, you know, I heard about the way you acted last night when you were drinking. Maybe you're one of those people who just shouldn't drink. I said, yes, but. So from the beginning, I was powerless, and I was also wanting to defend my right to drink. And it wasn't that I didn't want to drink that afternoon, but I knew that there was something that had happened that night before all the weirdness started that had been magical for me, because the only time I can feel at when I was a young woman, the only time I felt at one with the universe was a very brief period of time when I was drinking. Every drinking episode I ever had at least one small period of time where I felt at one and at peace with the universe. And so I drank. And I lived in Iowa until I was 23. I stopped drinking for a little while in my early 20s because I had to go back home and live with my parents for a while. I don't know if that's happened to anybody else besides me, but I had to go back home to Mommy and Daddy, and my dad was waiting up for me one night and said, you can live any way you want to, but if you're going to be here at home, you have to live in such a way that you're not an embarrassment to us. Because when I drink, not only do I make a fool out of myself, I'm one of those people, if you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. And I was really, I don't talk about that as much as I used to because I am in my mid-60s now. And quite frankly, it's a lot easier to be good when you're 65 years old and you have bad legs and weigh 190 pounds. It's easier to behave. So I don't know how much of it is spiritual growth and how much of it is just the fact that I'm old and fat and and I'm tired. But one of the things I start to do when I don't drink is I start planning things. And see, my idea of what I really am doing is fantasizing, but I think it's a plan. And of course, I'm still going to be a movie star, but I'm not going to go to Hollywood because that's where everybody goes. I'm going to go to Las Vegas, and I'm going to get discovered there in Las Vegas and then whisked off. I'm telling you, my IQ, I don't know how high it is, but I do know that people call my attention. When I was in school and acting funny, people would call my attention to it, wondering why anybody that could do this could act like that. So it's not that I'm not smart, but there's something in me that doesn't, I can be real sensible about a lot of things. I've never written a bad check in my life, drunk or sober. I know the difference between a gift and a loan. I know the difference between your stuff and my stuff. And I know that gas bills have to be paid and stuff, but I fantasize, and I think it's a plan, and I act accordingly. And so I did move to Las Vegas. I started to drink shortly after I got there. I started getting into trouble again, and it was just kind of bad. But I'm glad. I will say this, and this is not an AA thing. It just happens to be part of history. I was there in 1963 to 1965, and that was the tail end of the old Las Vegas, and that will never come back because it's just gotten too big. It will never come back, and I'm glad that I was a part of that. And it was a part of history that I'm glad, probably not as much as being around, in some of the movements that we've had in the United States that really have made changes in our lives. But it was fun. I'm glad I was there. I came over to I'd gotten mixed up with a fella in Iowa that I had to get away from, and then I got mixed up with the guy in Las Vegas I had to get away from, and I came over to Southern California, and I've lived down in Santa Monica since 1965. I've been here for 40 years, so I'm not a native, but I'm getting close. I'm kind of close to it, and I drank for another 4 years, and toward the end of my drinking, in 1968, I had found a job at a little coffee shop. I'd had some really kind of crappy jobs, working in saloons. I don't think none of you young, gorgeous people have ever been in places like the Tahiti or the Turkey Joint West or the Lightning Room or, any of those places down in Santa Monica, the Kismet, all these. There's a place on Pico that's still in existence as an entertainment establishment. It's called Cecil's now, but at one time that was a place called the Roundhouse. And I hope they've gotten rid of all the cockroaches that the Roundhouse had, because I remember tending bar there, and I'd go in the morning and I'd turn on the hot water to wash the glasses that were left from the night before, and those roaches would all come out. And it never bothered me a bit. I knew that eventually, when the sink cooled down, they'd all go back wherever they were. And to this day, I don't know. Maybe I might have been. I was not given to hallucinations, but for all I know, I was hallucinating those bugs. But I saw them almost every day. So anyway, that's. But in I couldn't stand this anymore. I'd always wanted to work in bars, and I was a bar drinker, and I liked that. I liked the low life, not the low life, but that just sort of on the lower end of the blue collar spectrum. I liked that because I could go into those places and get, I've always looked like an old maid school teacher since I was 5 years old, and I have a big vocabulary because I'm kind of an idiot savant with words. There's a lot of stuff I can't do, but I can throw words around pretty good. And so I love to work in those work and hang out in those blue collar, lower end places and throw my vocabulary around and try to pretend like I'm a big shot. And so that's what I was doing, but even I couldn't stand that any longer. So I ended up working in a little coffee shop on Wilshire Boulevard in Santa Monica around 15th Street. It's not there anymore, but God bless this guy for hiring me and letting me stay there, even when I was drinking, because I became a halfway decent waitress. And I also met a man and fell in love. Now, I've been in love a lot of times, and sometimes I think I really did have some kind of intense feelings, but my real idea of love is infatuation. I didn't know any different. And to be honest with you, if I walked out the door tonight and went looking for a man, I would be looking for the same kind of guy I always was looking for. I would not be looking for some nice guy with a pension so we could be companions and settle down and watch the Golden Girls reruns together. I'd be out looking for some excitement. But along with the infatuation this time, there was something deeper, and I believe this. I truly believe that I reached deep down inside myself to find that part, because I'd never felt much like a woman. I was over, without trying to be too precious about it, I was over sexualized. I was very intense that way, really more for. But really I was, I not that I'm more intense that way than anybody else, but that was all I knew how to do. I'm not very good. Dating, makes me uncomfortable, and so I did that. I had a lot of that, but I'd never been able to have I'd never felt the kind of feelings that women are supposed to have, the desire for marriage and a family, the desire to have children. I'd never had that. But I think that when in 1968, I knew there was something bad wrong with me. And when I met this young man, I reached deep down inside of me and pulled this out. And I really did love this kid. And I'm very grateful that it's like the Las Vegas experience. I'm very grateful that I loved him the way I did, because it had never happened before that, and it has not happened since. But my drinking, I was happy with him. I liked this kid. He liked me at the same time. He wasn't married, he didn't have a lot of baggage. I didn't have any baggage, and I thought I was going to have a life. But my drinking took that last inevitable turn, and I was drinking medicinally because I couldn't stand the way I felt when I was sober. I had these terrible feelings of panic. I was worried about my heart, and I worried I was having a stroke, and I worried about having earthquakes, and it was with me all the time. all the time. And the only thing that took it away was drinking, but drinking took it away every time. So of course I drank, I had to. But that kind of medicinal drinking, he was a little bit younger than I was, and that kind of medicinal drinking is not that much fun to be around when you're still having fun. So he left me, and it wasn't but 2 weeks after that that I was at my first AA meeting. I woke up that morning, it was August 4th, 1969. I'd been drunk the night before, but I'd been drunk every night for a long time, and I was ashamed and embarrassed for myself, but I'd been embarrassing myself for years, drunk and sober. But I woke up that day and I knew that I couldn't go on living any longer the way that I was living. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that I couldn't go on. And I went to work that day because I'd always gone to work. I had just started a new job. I had quit this job that I liked and went to this other job, and I said to myself, what were you thinking? But I thought maybe, what I was thinking was maybe if I had a different job and had to learn new things and meet new customers and get along with a different cook and everything, all the little attendant stuff that you have to mess with when you go to a new restaurant, it would take my mind off this panic. But of course, the only thing that takes my mind off panic is drinking. And so I had drank it. I woke up that day and I just couldn't go on. And I went to work because I always go to work. Through all this foolishness, I worked. I paid my bills. I sent Christmas presents home to my family. I voted. I tried to do the right thing. And I was cleaning off a table in this restaurant, and the thought occurred to me, why don't you try AA? And I haven't drank and I haven't taken psychiatric medication or smoked any dope. From that day to this, the only drug I ever really got any kick out of, I've smoked some dope because I don't know anybody in the 60s that hasn't smoked a little dope. But I never much cared for smoking dope. The only drug that I ever did like was Benzedrine. I'm old enough to remember when you buy when a dealer, to me now, was somebody that had rolled 10 Benzedrines in some tinfoil and sold them to you for $1. If somebody came up to you and said, "Are you holding?" that's what they meant. So anyway, that's a little history out of the 60s. So anyway, I went home from work that afternoon, and as I was going up the steps to my apartment, I said, I guess if I'm going to go to AA tonight, I won't go over to Pete's this afternoon. And I'd gone over to Pete's Wilshire House on the corner of 14th, one store down from the corner of 14th and Wilshire every day of my life for quite a while, because I had to. I had to drink, and I had to drink around other people who were drinking. I couldn't be alone except when I was unconscious. The boyfriend was gone. I didn't have it in me to go out and look for anybody else, so I just went into this bar every day and drank. And one of the birthday people talked about how small her life had gotten. And I identify with that because my life had gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. I lived on 14th and Wilshire in the middle of the block. In the middle of 14th Street. My restaurant that I worked at was at 15th and Wilshire, on Wilshire, and the saloon that I worked at was on Wilshire, just a little bit below 14th Street. That's my life. That was my life. And I walked up the steps to my apartment. I went to the telephone and I called Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't know where that came from. I just know that I was given that much grace that day to make that phone call and to stay away from Pete's Wilshire House. And I know that I wasn't scared that day. I got scared later, but I was not scared that day. I went to the meeting that night. People were kind to me. I did start shaking real bad after the identification part where they said alcoholics and newcomers. I started to shake really, really, really bad, almost like I was having a fit. And I said, oh, this is ridiculous. I didn't drink that much. Well, it was at 26th and Broadway, and I think that they keep the lights off, and it was kind of, a subdued meeting. And a lot of the people that were there at that time were the older people that had, gotten sober. Some of those guys, I think, had 20 years then, back in 1969. So, so I don't think anybody got that excited over some young woman who was in reasonably good health shaken, because I was skinny, if you can imagine. I was skinny and kind of forlorn looking, but I obviously wasn't, real sick. And so my shaking eventually stopped. I had tremors for months. I don't know if there's anybody else here. I know I remember a guy telling me this, and I was so glad because I hadn't told anybody that I did it. But I used to, at night, when I was trying to go to sleep, and I'd be in bed and the bed would start shaking, I would reach out and touch my nightstand to see if there was an earthquake or if it was just me shaking, and it was me shaking. There was one other guy that talked about that, and I've never heard anybody else say that. Every once in a while, I can see somebody's heartbeat through their shirt, because I know one time when I got up to give a talk, I was newly sober, and I was called on to speak, and I remember I could see my dress fluttering, because my heart was beating so hard that it was making my dress flutter. And but anyway, I went to the meeting that night. People were kind to me. They gave me a ride home. They gave me the literature. I went to bed, and I took the literature to bed with me, and I read it. And I was fascinated by this literature. And I woke up the next day to the sound of the alarm clock. I hadn't slept the night through, and I can't tell you how long, but I slept all night that night. I started going to meetings. A lady named Maj, who died a couple of years ago, sober, was my first mentor. I didn't ask her to be my sponsor, and she didn't ask me to call her that, but that's what she was. She helped me along. She guided me. She showed me the ropes. She encouraged me. She told me I was doing well. And but I started sniffing around this group that I'd see on Saturday night. Everybody in Santa Monica went to the same meeting. There was a bunch of people that were kind of fun, and I'd see them a little bit at other meetings that I went to, and I started kind of sniffing around them, and I got introduced to a girl named Alice, who was not that much sober longer than I was, and she was actually younger than I was. I was 29, she was about 27, but she took me on, and I asked her to be I didn't ask her to be my sponsor, because, I was such a mess, but yet I had a certain amount of arrogance. I don't know what I thought I had to be arrogant about, but I had a certain amount of arrogance. And I remember saying to her one night, Alice, people are asking me who my sponsor is, and I'm telling them it's you. Is that okay? So anyway, that's how Alice became my sponsor, and God bless her. Her life was in a lot more chaos than mine was, because I really didn't have any problems. I was crazier, goofier than a pet rattlesnake, but I was not in any kind of trouble. I had plenty of money to do what I had to do, and because I had a job and I was able to somehow or another do it. Not very well, but I did it well enough to hang on to it, and I never have been a big spender, so I wasn't in debt. My family was away. I didn't have any family obligations. So I had no chaos in my life, and she did, but she was very, very good to me. And one night I was having one of these nervous spells, and she told me to write an inventory, and I did. I followed her direction. I wrote an inventory, and I had to take it with her sponsor, because she hadn't finished her inventory by the time I'd finished mine. So I took my first inventory with her sponsor, who was Loanne. May she rest in peace. She was very kind to me. I was into some sort of eating regimen at that time. And I was eating boiled chicken and Brussels sprouts, and I can remember serving this horrible boiled chicken to her, and she ate it and listened to this dreadful inventory. So she certainly has gotten a high place in heaven for that act alone. And then eventually Alice wanted to start going to other meetings, and I wanted to stay put. So almost everybody that I liked real well, that I saw, doing things, and that was good to me and spent time with me and everything, was had Clancy for a sponsor, and I wanted what they had. They seemed to be enjoying life and doing well, and so I thought, well, if they got it from Clancy, maybe I will too. So I called him up and asked him if he'd be my sponsor, and he agreed to do that, and he's been my sponsor for the most part ever since. Betty H. was my sponsor for a little while, somewhere between after I was 5 years sober and before I was 10. She was my sponsor for a while, and I'm very grateful to her, because she gave me one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten in my life, and I passed it along all the time. Is I called her up one time, and I was having, these nervous spells are still, plaguing me. I'm 6 or 7 years sober, somewhere along there, and I said, Betty, I have to speak tonight, and I'm just a nervous wreck. I'm just frantic. I'm having one of my spells. What should I do? And she said, dress nice and act sane. And that's some of the best advice I've ever had in my life, is dress nice and act sane, because I may not necessarily feel sane, but I can act sane, and my taste has improved over the years. I can dress halfway decent. We all looked terrible in the 70s. So anyway, but Clancy became my sponsor. I learned to drive a car at his behest. He said, you have to learn how to drive so you can give back some of what's been given to you, and you've been given a lot of rides. And I think if he'd have put it any other way, I'd have not been able, because my nerves were such that I didn't think that I could drive without, really creating problems. And because of my nerves. I'm not a deliberately reckless person, but I'm somewhat dithery, and I'm very nervous and high-strung, and I didn't think I could do it, and he thought that I could, and I think it's because it was on a more spiritual plane. He didn't say do it so you can be independent. He said do it so you can be useful. And I remember hearing Chuck C. Now, I don't know that Chuck C. said this. All I know is that I heard him say it. And that is one time, alcoholics do not need to feel loved so much as they need to feel useful. And that's certainly been my case. I am not nearly as concerned about whether I am loved or not as if I am of some use to people, because I think that's one of the things I was looking for, a sense of power, a sense of that feeling of uselessness, and self-pity will slip away. I don't feel useless anymore. I cannot say that from time to time I become awash in self-pity, but I try not to let it last too long. But I don't feel useless anymore because I can't. I cannot justify a feeling of uselessness, because if there's a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous going on and I can get there, I have something to offer. The fact is that I haven't had anything to drink for 36 years. And it's because of what I've learned here in this fellowship. And obviously, I've always sort of thought that was God talking to me that day when it said, why don't you try AA? Maybe I was having an auditory hallucination, but I prefer to believe it was God talking to me. But he has not spoken to me directly since. I get my messages from God through the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was brought up in a religion, and I liked that religion, but I didn't stay sober doing that. One of the things I think one of the reasons I love AA so much, and I love the rituals we have here, is because I did always enjoy the ritual. It was very, very heavy on ritual, the church that I grew up in, and so I enjoy rituals because I'm used to them, and it comforts me and it centers me. Over the years, I never did become a movie star. Now, I believe you can rest assured that I fantasized after I got sober. I'm like 30 years old now. I'm going to start out at 30. But I had some fun, and we do not regret the past or wish to shut the door on it. I probably should have been trying to, I probably should have enrolled at SMC and gotten a few credits and then transferred over to UCLA and found out what my life's work was and done it. But I didn't want to. Now it makes sense, but why would I get mad? Why would I regret the past? I didn't have the information at 30 that I've got now. All the information doesn't come piling in on you at once, and then you spend the rest of your life sorting through it. The information comes incrementally, and so I took singing lessons, and I took ballet classes, and I took tap dancing lessons, and I took acting classes from out-of-work actors, and just had a wonderful time and waited to be discovered, and it didn't happen. But I was very lucky. When I was about 5 months sober, I heard practice these principles in all of our affairs, and it occurred to me that perhaps that meant that I was going to have to treat the job that I was actually making a living at with the kind of respect that I was going to give this imaginary career that I was going to have somewhere in the future. And so I started behaving a little bit better at work, because I showed up on time, I wore what they wanted me to wear, I didn't steal from them, and I was nice enough to enough customers that I never got, got thrown out of got fired for insubordination or anything. But I started to really enjoy my work more. And another thing I'm very grateful for, I got in on the ground floor of the theme restaurant, when theme restaurants were really kind of a big deal, and there wasn't one on every corner. And I worked there for 16 years, and that was not only was it a lot of fun, it was very exciting. It was really a thrill to work for a very charismatic man who just really, because I love the restaurant business. I'm not doing it anymore, but I love the restaurant business. I still read any magazine that has a restaurant review. I read it. I love the restaurant business, and he did too. He just had a feel for the restaurant business. It was an honor to work for him. And I got to travel a bit, because they started opening up restaurants in other cities, and I got to travel to places that I would not have ordinarily gone to, because when I go on vacation, I go home to Iowa to see my mom and dad. But I went to Honolulu and Texas and New Orleans and Australia. One day I came to work, and And one of the general managers was there and said, "Do you want to go to Australia?" And I said, "Tell me when to pack my suitcase." He said, "Go get a doctor's. You have to do so." I hired on with this guy to sell hamburgers and ended up getting to be a bit of a world traveler. So, I've had a pretty good life. I kind of semi-retired a few years ago. I was working at a deli that I'd worked at, and I went home to see my mom, and when I came back, they really didn't need me. They had enough help. And so I didn't fight. It kind of broke my heart that they didn't need me specifically, that they wouldn't push somebody else out of the way. But since I was already gone, that they didn't really need me. So I have become now a shop girl. And it's kind of fun because I don't know anything I've never done retail sales before except to sell t-shirts in the restaurant where I worked. And the only thing I have going for me is I go to work on time, I dress the way they want me to dress, and I'm affable. I hired on as the hello lady at Christmas time. They gave me a job and I was the hello lady. And every once in a while I'd have a little twinge and think, I'm a lot like that guy on the Walmart commercials, aren't I? But I thought, if they can't take a joke, So now that's what I'm doing, and it's kind of fun because it's given me a whole new perspective. Now I read the home section in the Times with a different eye. I try because I don't have good taste or bad taste. I have no taste at all. I buy furniture and I push it up against the wall and hope for the best. And so I'm trying to learn how to do these things because it's interesting to me. So and it's kind of fun to dress, wear these kind of clothes, and my clunky orthopedic shoes don't look so bad. And so it hasn't been a bad life. It wasn't the life I dreamed about, but it hasn't been a bad life. I'm not an unhappy woman. I believe that I've been able to do a little good. I've always had a sponsor. I try to sponsor. I do. I don't try to sponsor people. I sponsor a few people, and anybody that asks me I'll just tell them what I did in the situations they have. I answer my telephone. I'm able to talk to people. Sometimes it's kind of nice for newer people to have an old timer for a friend, not just you got a sponsor, and then to kind of have an old timer for a friend. And I try to be that way. I try to be a friend to people. Since I didn't have a watch in the group that I go to. They have the big watches, and I didn't have one because it really hadn't got started like that when I was new. And because I got up and went to work so early in the morning, it never really was a part of what I did. But lately, when I don't work that much, I've been able to go to some of these watches because I had a baby that had a watch. Because I said, if you want a watch, you got to go to them, and you can't start a month before your birthday. You've got to start going to at least 2 or 3 of them a month. And she did, and thank God she did, because she knows everybody. She knows everybody in that group, and she had a stroke not too long ago, and nobody's forgotten about her. It's been a long time, and she only gets to meetings like just recently she's been able to come on Saturday night because she went to those watches and went to all those things, and people got to know her and care about her. So when she was going, I started going because I don't work that much anymore. And now, even though she has a year, I still go, I kind of go on her behalf because she can't get out to them. So I've been able to do some of those things, and I was involved in general service a few years ago, and I have time again that I can do it again. I did it for 7 years, and I took a break, and now I'm able to do it again because general service is one of those things. I don't particularly like it, but I don't mind. I don't mind. So I have a life that has some purpose to it, and I'm grateful for that, and it's time for me to stop and thank you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.